Hi, everyone. I'm Ariana Davis, editorial director of digital at The Today Show and author of What Would Frida Do? A Guide to Living Boldly. And I am so thrilled to be here for tonight's Random House studio sessions with the one and only Isabel Allende, the author of so many novels that you know and love, everything from Violeta and Long Petal by the Sea, House of Spirits, and now The Wind Knows My Name, which is out tomorrow. Welcome, Isabel.
Thank you, Ariana. It's wonderful to be with you.
It's so lovely to be here tonight, and I thank you to Penguin Random House for these studio sessions that you host for bookworms like us. I'm so excited to chat with you tonight. I know we're going to talk all about your new book, and I have many questions, but before we get into that, we're going to play a little game called In a Few Words.
Oh, I hate those games.
It's a little rapid fire. We're going to just like shoot all of the questions at you, and you got to just tell us.
I'm 80 years old. I can't think fast. So be patient.
Okay, well, in a few words, we're going to start with what book is on your nightstand right now?
Dave Eggers' new book, which is called The Eyes and the, Imagination or something like that.
Okay, we got to Google that one.
I'm sorry that I don't remember it exactly because I haven't read it yet. It's on the night table.
Okay, so
but it's a wonderful book.
That's to be read. Got it. Your favorite place to read?
Audiobooks in the car and in the living room sometimes.
Nice.
I don't read in bed.
Oh, you don't read in bed? Why is that?
I do other things in bed.
I have questions, but this is a PG session over here. What's one random good thing that happened to you today?
That I woke up with my husband.
Oh, that's so nice.
Well, it's a new husband.
The new husband, I love it. Best piece of writing advice you've ever received?
Actually, it's from Elizabeth Gilbert. Don't expect your writing to give you money or fame. Write because you love it. You love the process.
I needed to hear that one. That's a good one. Thank you, Liz Gilbert. What's your favorite room to write in your house?
The attic in my house, where I have a desk, but I have a little office that I love. I go there.
Beautiful. Where do you get your book recommendations?
From Book Passage, a bookstore close to my house. I'm from my agent, Johanna Castillo.
Shout out to Johanna.
Yes.
What about one word to describe your reading behavior?
Chaotic.
Ooh, chaotic.
Chaotic. I don't follow any rules. I'm a chaotic reader. And by the way, I drop the book if I'm not interested by page 60.
Oh, I was going to ask, so you're someone, you don't have to finish a book. You're like, goodbye.
Goodbye.
I love that. Paperback, hardcover, or ebook?
Both, everything. Depending on the circle. If I travel, it's on my iPad. If I'm in the car, it's the audiobook. So it depends.
Favorite word, old or new?
The word I say the most, precioso, preciosa.
Oh, preciosa.
That's instead of dear, instead of darling, instead of lovely, instead of I like it. Something is precioso.
Oh, that's beautiful. My favorite Mark Anthony song, Preciosa. Who are some authors that you are loving right now?
Myself.
Perfect answer. I love it. Speaking of yourself as an author, The Wind Knows My Name is your 27th book? Is that right?
I think so. I'm not sure, but I think so.
From when the House of Spirits was published in 1982, you've published 27 books. That is incredible. You've said, I have the characters in my soul all the time. I'm curious, how do you feel like you've changed as a writer in 40 years? If you look back on that writer back then to you now, how have you changed as a writer?
I think I have more self-confidence. I know that if I dedicate enough time, I will be able to write it. Before, I had the feeling that it was like a gift, that the book was like an apple that fell on my lap and it was a one-time thing and it wouldn't happen again. Or the feeling that I was struggling with the story. And now I don't. I feel that the experience of all these 40 years is paying off, finally. But other things are I have less innocence. I know more about the book industry and readers and all that I didn't before. So I have lost the innocence and the free spirit that I had at the beginning.
Wow.
So be careful, huh? Because you are writing. You have to do it now.
I'm taking notes. Taking notes. How do you know when an idea is the one where, because you've written 27 books, I'm sure there's been plenty of ideas that you've, not gone with. How do you know this is the idea that's my next novel or that will become a novel?
I have to be sure that I'm passionate about it, because once I start it, I will finish it. I have never left, something unfinished. But it's like a tumor in my stomach that starts to grow and bothers me until I know that it is the thing that I need to write about. And sometimes I have like two ideas. That happened this year, that I was thinking, am I going to write a book, maybe a novel, or a memoir? And so on January 8th, which is the day I start all my books, I started both. And let it happen to see which one takes off.
Wow.
And that's how I know that that's the project for the year.
Wow, starting 2 books at once, that gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
Well, the other one I haven't done.
Yeah, like, that one didn't work.
Well, it's like having 2 lovers. It's not difficult if you have strategy.
Okay, good advice. Speaking of January 8th, tell me, I know you've talked about this in interviews before, but why January 8th? Why is that the date that you've set where you're like, every year you're gonna start writing something new?
Not every year. It depends if I have finished the other book.
Okay.
If I have finished the previous project, then I'm ready to start researching and preparing for a new book on the next January 8th. So if I had written a book a year, I would have 40 books, and I don't. What was the question?
January 8th, why that date?
Well, I started The House of the Spirits on January 8th, and it was a lucky book. But at the time, I was working in a school, and it was a full-time job, 12 hours a day. It was just hectic. But between Christmas and February, it was vacation, holiday. So it was I had free time, and that's why I started then. But also because my first novel started as a letter to my grandfather, who was dying in Chile at that time. And then it was such a lucky book, my first novel, that I started the second and the third, and then I can't change it, because if I change it, it will be a flop. Of course.
You're like, this is the lucky date. I can't change anything.
I can't change it any. No.
So The Wind Knows My Name is out tomorrow, and in the book, I couldn't put this down. I felt, there's just several storylines, and they all come together in a really beautiful way, which I won't give it away for anyone who hasn't read it yet. But it's a novel that's about, I feel it's about love, it's about discovery, it's about bravery and courage. How did this particular idea come to you?
I think that the seed was when I started seeing in the press everywhere the separation of families at the border during the Trump policy of trying to deter people from coming in. And that was a cruel, horrible thing that happened. And there was an uproar everywhere internationally and within the country, and that policy was eventually stopped. But by then, there were thousands of kids that had been separated, and nobody thought of the reunification. So we still have 1,000 kids that have not found their families. So I have a foundation, and my foundation works, among other things, with organizations at the border who help migrants and asylum seekers, refugees. So through them, I got to know about a case of a little girl very much like Anita in the book. And that was the seed for the book.
Wow. I feel that one of the beautiful things about this book is you really kind of humanize this. I think we hear about the term immigration and refugees, and
it's just numbers.
It's just numbers, yeah.
It's like an abstract concept. Until we see someone's face, we learn the name, we hear the story. And then it becomes real. And then you realize that it could happen to you. It could be your kid that had been taken from your arms and thrown into the bureaucracy of the system.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the role of a writer, to bring the experience so close that it becomes the reader's. It's not my intention to preach or to give a message or to change anybody, but just to make the connection. There's a moment in the book when the protagonist, the protagonist is an old man who was separated from his family when he was almost 6, because the family had to put him in a train and send him away to save him from the Nazis and the concentration camps. And he grows up with a hole in his heart. He never sees anybody from his family again. They have all been exterminated. And he lives a sheltered life, a life that is so safe that he doesn't want to take any risk of any kind. And he has a wonderful, wild wife. He doesn't want to know what the wife does because it's already getting involved with something. And then when he's 86, the pandemic hits and he ends up in his house, sheltering at home. And for the first time, he can reflect on his life and realizes, and he says in one moment in the book, he says, my sin, the capital sin of indifference. And sooner or later, you pay for that sin. And that's the whole point. We are all indifferent to other people's suffering until we have it here in front of our face.
Yeah. The character, I love the character of Sam's wife, by the way. I love that she was with this wild woman, and their relationship was so beautiful. But obviously, Anita and Sam, they kind of had this shared experience of being, you know, refugees in very different ways. One from the Nazi, in post-Holocaust, and then Anita in 2019. Did you pull from any of your own personal experiences seeking refuge in your own story as you were writing this?
You know, I have been a political refugee and an immigrant, but a very privileged one. Because when I left my country, I went to Venezuela, which at the time in the 70s was one of the richest countries in the world. Open, generous, a democracy, a wild, chaotic, and wonderful democracy. And it received immigrants from all over the world. And there was work and hospitality. It was very different. So I never went through the horrible ordeals that most refugees go through. And I lived in Venezuela for 13 years. And then I became an immigrant in the United States because I fell in lust with a guy, not because I was looking for the American dream.
Fell in lust, that's a very specific.
And by the time I came here, I was a writer. I could support myself. I didn't have to be cleaning latrines.
So it's a very different experience from the experience of your characters. And then you also write in the book about the El Mozote massacre. Tell us why you chose to bring that into the book, because that also, there's a very big kind of storyline that happens around that massacre specifically. What inspired you to include that?
Well, in the 80s, in El Salvador, in a place called El Mozote, were several little villages, and the military were looking for guerrillas for the it was a military dictatorship. And they went in with the idea of terrorizing the population. They killed them all. They killed more than 800 people, including all the children, the babies. The blood of the babies, with the blood of the babies, they wrote on the walls. And that's what they did with total impunity, no accountability. And then they tried to cover it up. And they covered it up for years and years. And they denied what had happened. By the way, the CIA was involved in training those. So also in Washington, it was denounced in Washington and nobody paid attention, and they shushed it in the press as well. So in order to explain why people get out of a place, you have to explain what's going on in that place to force people to get out. So one of my characters, Leticia, runs away from El Mozote. She's one of the very few survivors. So in order to explain the reason why refugees from everywhere get out, you have to explain what's happening in that country. We did not have refugees from Ukraine until very recently. Now we have millions. We didn't have refugees from Syria until the civil war started in Syria. Now we have refugees from Afghanistan. So unless you solve the problems in the countries of origin, you will always have people running away. That's why I needed to tell about El Mozote.
So we talked a little bit about this before we started, but so you're talking about the Holocaust, you're talking about immigration in 2019, you're talking about this 80s, this massacre in El Salvador. How do you, what's your research process like, and how do you keep all of this information together for a novel like this?
You are asking because you are doing the same thing. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You know, research is that you pick up a thread and you start pulling, and then one thing brings another, and another, and another, and then it grows. And if you are not organized, it becomes impossible to untangle all that mess. So I have folders for everything. But in this case, the research was very easy because it's a recent story. Leticia, for example, is inspired. The inspiration for Leticia is a friend of mine who is from El Salvador. I see her every day. She takes care of my dogs. So all the part about El Salvador, she gave me that, and it's very contemporary. The only part that I needed really to research was the part about the Nazis and the Kindertransport. But that's also recent history. I have written historical novels that are placed 200 years ago, and then that's a difficult research.
Yeah, that's
That's
you're going
different.
way back.
Way back.
I loved in this book, just like many of your others, there's some female characters. Leticia, you mentioned. Selena also, she's like the kind of social worker who's at the center that ends up bringing all of these characters together in different ways. What is it for you? Is it important for you to have strong female characters leading each of your books? What draws you to putting those kinds of characters in each of your works?
Well, first of all, I don't know any weak women. Do you?
No, I don't.
You don't.
Yeah.
And then in this particular subject of refugees and migrants, the people who do the work are mostly women. There are 40,000 lawyers in the United States that work pro bono to represent the kids in court. Most of them are women because there's no fame, no glory, and no money in it. It's a work of compassion. And most of the social workers, most of the psychologists that work with the kids, all those people are women. And we, through the foundation, I say we, it's not the royal we, it's my daughter-in-law who runs the foundation, my son, myself. We know these people. We know women like Selena. Selena was very easy to build that character because I know at least 2 women that even look like her.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to invent anything.
Wow. Tell me more about the foundation and how does the things that you learn about as you're researching for books like this, how does that inform the work that you do with your foundation? Usually
it's separate. People say that I'm an activist, but there's no activism in my books. I write fiction, and that is a completely separate realm for me. And then the activism or the whatever philanthropic work I might do, it's through the foundation. And we focus mostly, absolutely, we focus on women and children, girls, internationally. And we work with the most vulnerable, the people who are most at risk in the areas of education, of protection from violence and exploitation, and health. And health, of course, includes reproductive rights.
That's so admirable, and I think that the fact that you keep them separate is also meaningful as well. Anita, in your book, she is she's young, but she's also powerful in her own way, and I love that she kind of escapes to this magical world where it's, for anyone who hasn't read the book, it's kind of her way of coping with, escaping where she is right now and everything that she's been through. Do you think that was kind of a form of magical realism in the way that you've often thread that into your other books?
That was not my idea.
Yeah.
When I talk to people who are working with the kids, many of the kids, for example, stop talking. After something so traumatic happens, they stop talking and they go into their fantasy world where they feel safe. They sort of deal with the trauma in different ways, and being in this fantasy world helps them. So it wasn't my idea. It's something that really happens in real life. Wow,
that makes sense. It's a way of coping. And Anita also, she's kind of the character that gives the book its name. The Wind Knows My Name. She says in one part of the book to her imaginary friend, "No, we're not lost. The wind knows my name and yours too. Everyone knows where we are." Can you tell me a little bit more about that line and how that ended up as the title of the book?
The title of the book isn't mine. Johanna Castillo, my agent, came up with the title. But it made a lot of sense because the kids, when they are separated, they're given a number because they move them around so much that they are identified with a number. So the fact that they lose their everything. And they also lose their name. It's just horrific. And so Anita doesn't know where her mother is, but she needs to feel that other people know where she is, that she's not lost, and she's not a number. She has a name.
Ooh, I love that. I wondered, because you wrote in your author's note, knowing that their children would be taken away, people often ask, who would risk crossing the border? The answer, only those who are running for their lives. And through these stories, as we've talked about, you do a really brilliant job of kind of humanizing some of these stories. But for anyone who's out there who's like, oh, I don't know if I want to read a book about immigration reform, or feels like a heavy topic, what would you say to them?
Don't read the book.
Good answer. No, not for you.
No, not for you. Because you know what? I get a lot of messages, many a week, of people who say, especially young women, who say, you changed my life. I haven't changed anybody's life. If they read the book and they felt connected to the story, it's because they already thought that way. They already felt that way. The seed is inside. The only thing I did was to just put it in words that they can connect to. It has happened to me with books. When I was very young, I read a book by Germaine Greer, the female eunuch, and I was angry at everything, and I didn't know how to say it, how to express it, how to transform that anger into action. And I read that book and I realized that there is an articulate language to denounce the patriarchy, a language that is full of humor and irony and intelligence. And I said, wow, I'm not a lunatic. This is real. And that changed my life. But it's because I already had the anger inside. What the book did was move the anger into action. And I think that that's what happens with some books. We just have the book inside, and somebody else just says it.
Yeah, and if it's meant to resonate with you, then it will. Yeah. So 27 books. This is the 27th. How would you say that this book was different for you than other books that you've written?
They're all different. I have written absolutely everything except an erotic novel. And I didn't because my mother was alive. She died very late. She was 98 by the time she died. And by then I didn't have any hormones left. So, of course, that's the only book that I have not written.
Never say never. And we talked a little bit about this, but you mentioned that you're working on your next book already. Can you tell us anything about it? Nope, not a word.
And this is another advice for you, young writer. Don't talk about what you have not done yet, because it gets diluted. You know, it's like putting water in the soup.
Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone at home has any questions for Isabel, please start letting us know, and we'll start passing them along. I'm curious. You gave me some great advice before we were talking, but for anyone who's watching at home, who is looking for advice on where to find inspiration for their books or how to find inspiration as a writer, do you have any advice?
I think that if you want to write something, it's because you have a story to tell. So explore the story, go deeper into the story. Don't lose the story. Usually the first book is something that has happened to you and that you transform into something else. I wrote The House of the Spirits as an exercise in longing, in trying to recover everything that I had lost in exile, my family, my grandfather, all the anecdotes of the family, my country, everything. And I think that most young writers who are starting with something have to draw from their own life and their memory, and don't lose that.
How do you know, because we were talking a little bit about reviews, and you mentioned it doesn't sound like you're someone who reads a lot of the reviews of your books. So for you, how do you know if a book was a success?
I don't. Some people tell me later. For example, my latest book, Violeta, did very well commercially. I mean, it did very well. So after a year or so, Johanna or somebody says, oh, Violeta is doing very well. And that's all I know. But I'm not attached to the outcome. I love the process of writing. And if the book does well, so be it. It's fine for everybody else. But I'm already in the next project. I don't worry about who is going to read it or how many copies are going to be sold. That's not my job.
Yeah, like Liz Gilbert said, it's not about the money or the fame. It's just about the loving the
loving
process.
the process.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think we have a couple reader questions. Thank you. Okay, so our first question is from Roberto, who says, I am Chilean. I was adopted at birth by a U.S. family in 1986. And I have found a lot of comfort in your novels, a feeling that I was discovering parts of my lost culture being raised American. Thank you for that. What is your general advice for people who have similarly been removed from their culture or are struggling with a sense of identity? Great question.
You know, if you are struggling with a sense of identity, it's because you miss something. You are missing something that you feel is yours. I'm often asked by young, especially kids, I mean teenagers, young immigrants that come from Latin America and want to assimilate. They want to be American. And I keep telling them, you can be American without losing your roots, without losing your language, your color, your music, your food, everything that makes you who you are. The fact that you are bicultural is wonderful. It enriches you. So in order to be American, you don't have to stop being anything else. You can keep adding, keep adding. And so for him, I would say, just look for your roots. Go to Chile, look for that and incorporate all that into the person you are. It makes you so much richer and interesting.
Yeah, that's such good advice. We have another question from Janonia, who says, great news that you are considering writing a memoir. Will that be a continuation of The Sum of Our Days?
Actually, no, because when I wrote The Sum of Our Days, I promised my son that I would never write another book in which he was mentioned or anybody from his family. Wow. So if I write a memoir, it would have to be about myself alone, which would be very boring. It's me and the dogs. It's not much.
I don't know. I would read about you and the dogs in your audiobooks, but maybe I'm alone. Another question from Antoinette. She says, did you use familial or personal backgrounds or experience as inspiration for this novel?
I use the experience of other people. I am not in the novel at all. Yeah. But I have a lot of people around me that inspired the characters and helped me with the research. As I mentioned before, the character of Leticia is based on Annie, my good friend. It's her life. It's what she escaped from, what she lived. So it's not. I was very fortunate to have all these people willing to open up.
Yeah. Did I read that you, is it Kindertransport? Is that was inspired by a play that you saw?
Yeah. Yeah. There was a play that I saw many, many years ago here in New York, and it was called Kindertransport. And it is the story of a girl that is separated from her family, and she's one of the survivors. So when I saw the play, it had a huge impact in me, but I never thought I would use it again or that it would connect. Until kids were separated here, I didn't make the connection at all.
Wow. We have another question from Daniela, who says, one of the things I love most about your writing is the intention and care with which you construct the lives and stories of your characters. What is the creative process for constructing a life? How do you create characters that feel as human as we do and are as memorable as if they were real? Ooh, good question.
I have two tricks. The first one is I use all the senses. So when I describe a scene, how does it smell? What's the temperature? What's the texture? What do you hear? Everything that your senses can capture is the description, not only what you see. And that's a very good trick to bring the place to life. And the other thing that I learned in the theater, I wrote theater plays when I was young, and each actor, even if they appear for a moment in the scene to just bring a cup of coffee, you study who that person is, the background, does he smoke, what he likes, what he doesn't like, is he from which social class. You study everything about that person to make that person real, even if none of it will be in the play. And I do the same with a character. Even if it's a secondary character, I imagine everything about the life of that person, even if that person will appear only in a few pages.
I love that. You're creating like a little profile of each person.
And sometimes I have a file for each, at least for the main characters.
So there's a lot of files and folders in Isabel Allende's house.
A lot, yeah.
Marina wants to know, do you have a daily writing practice?
Of course. I mean, this is my day job. So I get up very early because I'm usually around 5:30 in the morning. I get up early, I put on full makeup, and I go and I exercise with makeup because otherwise I don't feel good. And then my day starts, and I have my cup of coffee after my exercise and everything, and I go to the office.
What kind of exercise do you do?
Every day I do something. I do gyrotonics 3 times a week. I do exercises with he's a kind of kinesiologist, but he used to work with the ballet. So it's very special what he does. And I never exercised before. My son, who used to run the marathon or whatever, I was like, why are you running if nobody's chasing you? Why would you run? Take the bus. And now I realize that he was right. I mean, my life changed completely since I exercise every day. And then I go to my little office and I work. I write, I research, I read. I love it.
Yeah, I love it.
And then by, let's say, around the time when the traffic gets bad, I go back home and there's my husband who just retired. And we have dinner and it's nice.
Wow. I can feel that how much you love writing even still, which is amazing to see.
I love it.
Yeah.
And you know what I love also? When I read a book, to imagine the process. I read the book, I say, what was this guy thinking? How did he put this together? How did he join this with this?
Yeah.
Discovering the inner works.
How many folders did he have for research?
Yeah.
I love that. Martha wants to know, all of your novels are quite different, though always portraying amazing, strong women. Of those women that you've created, do you have one who is your favorite?
Yes, because I didn't create it, I copied her. She was my grandmother, and it's Clara in the House of the Spirits. My grandmother was crazy and wonderful. And she spent her short life experimenting with the paranormal. So I grew up in a house where there were seances to call the spirits. And my grandmother, according to the legend, could move the table without touching it. And so I grew up with the mystery of my grandmother. And so she inspired the character of Clara. And I love her.
This is a question for me that just popped in my brain. Do you prefer to write in English or Spanish?
I only write in Spanish, fiction. I can write nonfiction in both languages. I wrote The Soul of a Woman with both English and Spanish on the computer, on the screen. That I can do, but fiction happens in the womb. It doesn't happen in the brain. And I can only do it in my language.
Wow, I love that. It happens in the womb. Dropping gems today. Alexandra wants to know, what book have you written is your favorite and why?
That I have written? I don't have a favorite book, but I have books that are more meaningful to me. Well, of course, The House of the Spirits, because it made me a writer, gave me a voice, and it paved the way for all my other books. I'm very grateful to that book. But the book that has brought a big continuous response from the readers is a memoir that I wrote called Paula. And it's a memoir about my daughter who died prematurely. And we get letters, I say we, not again the royal we, at the office we get letters every week, sometimes more than once a week. And my daughter died 30 years ago, and we still get letters from people that everybody has losses. I recently, 3 weeks ago, and I'm very sorry about this, a woman wrote to me and said that her daughter had been diagnosed with a terminal disease. The girl was 14 years old. And right before I took the plane to come here, I got the letter that the girl had died. Ugh. And the mother was devastated, heartbroken. She wanted me to tell her what to do with the grief. And what can I say? You have to live through it. You will never get over it. You just live through it, day by day, tear after tear. And that's the way it goes. So that book was connected me in a way to millions of people in ways that no other book has.
Wow. Angelique, we have another question. She says, we've spoken about the start of your writing process, but what is the writing process like for you during? How do you honor and take care of yourself during the process?
I don't honor myself. I don't have time for navel watching. No.
You're like, I'm just writing. I'm just working.
I love it. I love writing, so why would I waste time doing anything else? I don't like massages. I don't meditate. I don't do yoga. I don't drink green tea. None of it.
Just like, I'm just working hard. I love it. What was the most difficult part about writing this book? This is from Daira.
Learning about the kids. Learning about the kids breaks your heart. You think of each one of them, and the ones that are still in the system that have not found their parents. Recently, I met Javier Zamora, who wrote that beautiful book called Solito.
So good.
And he came for dinner with his parents to our house, and we had a little dinner at home around the table where my grandmother had the seances. Wow. So it's charged with spirits. And we went around the table, and everybody cried for different reasons. Javier Zamora's mother cried, remembering the moment she saw her son after 2 months that he was lost. They didn't know where he was. And after 4 years that she hadn't seen him. And when she saw him for the first time. The father also cried, telling how when they met for the first time in a gas station, Javier cried thinking about the time that he had been alone and abandoned. Everybody at the table. So there was a connection about this shared grief that was so touching.
Wow, and I love that you sat around that table and that you felt, you said it was
Well, it's the only table I have, by the way. I don't have another table.
That's also such a beautiful book. I loved his memoir as well.
I'm going to be with him in conversation in one of the events.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, in Dominican University in Marin County.
Oh, great.
And that will be the 14th of June. So I'm looking forward to that.
That will be a great conversation, I'm sure. Jen wants to know, what is your biggest source of daily inspiration?
You know, it depends on the book. But I would say that the inspiration comes with the work. People say, well, you have to sort of wait for inspiration. The muse will come floating from somewhere. It doesn't happen that way. When you are working, the inspiration is in the air, but you have to do the work. It won't happen otherwise.
Oh, good. More questions. I love it. Anna wants to know, what is the most valuable lesson that life has taught you throughout the years?
To let go.
Oh, you didn't even hesitate with that.
Oh, because I have learned that, and in my 80s, I know very clearly that freedom comes from letting go. Letting go of what other people expect from you, from ambition, from grudges, from stuff. Let go of stuff. Let go of people, so the toxic people or people who don't give you back anything, or just let go, and you acquire a sort of freedom that is like having wings, and it is wonderful. So that is the biggest lesson, and I wish I had done it before, instead of being attached to ideas, to projects, to anger. I'm still devastated by the suffering in the world, but I'm not attached anymore to the outcome because I cannot solve it. I can only be part of it and go with it.
Not
This is what I
attached.
try to tell this lady about the grieving process. We will never get over it, but we have to let go of the attachment to the pain and just get the pain, let the pain go through you. It's okay.
Have you ever thought about being a therapist? Just asking.
Oh, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Maybe another career if you're interested. Just saying, I think you would be good. Karina wants to know, what changes do you think should be made to make the immigration process more humane and fair in the U.S.? Big question.
First of all, we need the immigrants. The immigrants do all the work that no American wants to do. So one way of solving partly this would be to give people work permits so that people could come in, do the work, and go back to their villages if they want. That was done before, and for some reason it's not anymore. So that would solve part of the illegal immigrant problem. Now, the refugee problem is different because those people need to be assimilated into this country because they're running away for their lives. And in that case, the only thing that can help is trying to solve the problems in the countries of origin. So instead of investing millions and millions in a war on drugs that doesn't work, that has not worked for 40 years, you try to change the conditions in each country, so in each village really, so that poverty is not what brings in the narcos and the gangs and the maras and everything else. And instead of supporting authoritarian governments that spend the money in corruption and in the military, try to help in human resources. So there's a lot that can be done with a good intention, but there is no good intention.
That's very real. There is no good intention. Adrienne says, my husband reads your work in Spanish and I in English, and we both love your books. Writing in Spanish and English is very different as the languages flow so differently. How do you choose who will translate your books? Do you feel like the essence or the feeling it ever gets lost in translation? And if not, how do you assure that there is consistency?
My books are translated to 42 languages.
Wow.
Sometimes I can't even, I don't even know if the book is mine because it's another alphabet, and if my photograph is not there, I don't know if it's my book. But my editor and Johanna choose the translator. And I had the same translator for most of my books before, but she died. And so now I have another translator, and she does a fantastic job. And I don't really have to do much, just read and see if there are any. What sometimes is lost in translation is humor, irony, because it's very cultural, and it's difficult to translate that. What might be funny in Venezuela is politically incorrect here. So in the translation, you have to adjust it. And I remember when Margaret Sawyer Peden was translating my books, most of my books, sometimes she would call me and she would say, you know what? This sounds okay in Spanish, but it's very sentimental in English. Can we tone it down a little bit?
I could see that. Sometimes it's like, maybe it reads like a novela a little bit in English.
Yeah, it looks like a telenovela.
Ooh, I love this question from Georgette. How do you stay so young and beautiful and vibrant?
That's the camera and the lights and makeup.
I'm here
I told
in
you,
person.
lots of makeup.
I see you in person. But really, what would you say is kind of your approach to aging? I feel like you're not someone who's hung up on it, or are you?
No, not at all. Not at all. I'm happy that I reached this age. I could be dead. The alternative is death. It's not good. And I think that there are a few things that help in an old age. First, good health, and I'm very fortunate. Nothing hurts. Second, community. And community could be family, could be your neighborhood, could be your church, but you cannot be alone. Belong in a community. It's very important. And to have purpose, to have something to do that gives meaning to your life. It could be making sandwiches for the homeless. It could be planting trees. It could be writing books, whatever it is that takes you out of yourself. Because with age, we tend to go inside, and the world becomes very small until you end up in bed. I mean, I saw my parents, as you become incapacitated physically, you stop going out. You can't drive. Your friends can't come because they're just in the same condition. So the world gets smaller, then it's the apartment, then it's the room, then it's the bed. And then you're dead. It's the coffin. So as long as you can get out and participate in something that gives purpose to your life, aging is a very nice time. It's a time when you don't care about what other people think. It's a time of freedom.
I was just going to ask you, you don't strike me as someone who, but even I think from following you and your work for so long, I don't feel like you've ever been someone who cares what other people think? Is that something that you
yes.
think what has come with age, or how did you get to that point where other people's opinions?
I did care about what other people thought.
Yeah.
I have a big butt. And so I would always cover myself with a starched tunic. Now I don't give a damn. Yeah. I just wear pants. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter to me. Well, it's also true that now big butts are in.
Yes.
They were not before. So unfortunately, it came too late for me.
Thanks, J-Lo. Thank you to J-Lo for that. We have another question. You mentioned writing a letter to your grandfather with your first book, and I feel like that's a lost art. What has letter writing meant to you, and was there anyone else in your life that you corresponded with regularly via letter writing?
That's a wonderful question, because I wrote to my mother every single day since age 15. And she wrote back to me. At the beginning, it was the mail. Then there were faxes. And then there was email. My mother wrote the last time for me 6 days before her death.
Wow.
That was her last letter. And I have collected her letters since 1987. Her letters and copy of mine, because she would give me back my letters also. And we have in the garage a box for every year. And every box contains around 600 letters, because it's her letters and mine. Wow. So that adds up to thousands of letters. And my relationship with my mom was incredibly intense and deep and open. We could talk about anything because of the letters, because we were never together. But I had a wonderful mother because she could write, and I could write back to her.
Yeah, and there's, I think, things
That's what I miss the most.
Yeah,
is the letter writing.
And you can say things in a letter because you're really sitting with it and you're thinking about it that maybe would get lost in conversation in person.
But you know what it was? I would write to my mom at the end of the day. So it was, I would tell her what the day had been about. And there was a record of life. And now I don't have that. So the days just blend into one another, and I don't know what happened yesterday. I don't remember what happened a couple of days ago, and somehow I realized it's not important. But because it was recorded in my mother's letter, I have the feeling that if I need to know what happened July 14th, 1988, I go to the garage, get out the box, look at the date, wow. And I know exactly what happened with the emotion of the day.
Wow. So it was like your journal, but with your mom, your letters to your mom. Someone else asks, you have been championed as the first internationally successful female Latin American author. How do you maintain self-assurance in your skills in a male-dominated space?
I don't worry about the males too much. Because if I did, I would feel, I don't know, maybe I would have less self-confidence. But I focus on what I do. And I was very fortunate that my first novel was published during the time of the Latin American boom of literature. A bunch of fantastic male writers, all of them, that wrote between the 60s and the 80s, innumerable great books that took the literary world by assault. There were no women in that movement. And then I wrote The House of the Spirits, and then the publishers realized that there was a market for women writers in Latin America and in Spain. And many people say that that book also paved the way for them, not only for my own writing, but also for them. So, and now the situation is different. I mean, there are hundreds of women writing, young women, writing incredibly beautiful and strong books.
Yeah, and we're reading them too. It's for us. I love this next question. You mentioned falling in lust. Can you talk more about lust and love and how it influences your stories?
Well, when I was young, I would confuse lust with love and make many mistakes because of it. Now, as I said before, my hormones are failing, so there's less lust. I can look at a photograph of Antonio Banderas and don't feel aroused. I just look at him as I would look at a painting by, I don't know, Picasso or something. But I have been always somehow in love. I have always had someone in my life that I think I'm in love with. And it takes me a long time to let go of that person when it's not working. I was married 29, I was with my first husband 29 years, 9 years too many. And with my second husband, 28 years, 8 years too many. And now I am married to Roger and I don't have 20 years ahead of me. So maybe this is my last husband, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. He could die and then I would have to look for somebody else.
You never know what could happen.
Never know.
Never say never. In
I could
Isabel
be
Allende.
102 and get married, who knows?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, thank God he's not listening to this.
Roger, we're sending you love. Sol wants to know, how do you stay connected to your roots and your culture?
My roots are in my books, in my language, in my family, in the people I love, in my memory. But I've been a displaced person all my life. I was born in Peru and my father abandoned my mother, so we moved to Chile. Then my mother married a diplomat and we traveled during my childhood and my adolescence. Then I became a political refugee, then an immigrant. So I've always been a foreigner. And I don't resent that. It's been good for me because it forces me to pay attention, to observe carefully, to listen carefully, because I don't take anything for granted. I don't know the clues and the codes that everybody else knows. And in that process, I think I get the stories. In asking the questions that nobody else asked because they know the answer.
Yeah.
I get the story. But my connection to my roots is, I would say, the fact that I write in Spanish and I think in Spanish and everything in my head is Chilean, with a Chilean accent. Although I have lived in Chile very few years of my life, very few. But those years marked me.
Those made you who you are.
Yeah, I can recognize a Chilean that is walking in the street without even hearing. There's a way of walking that I cannot, it's very different from a Venezuelan walking in the street, very different.
You know your people, I love that. Well, my final question for you, which I think I already know the answer, is would you ever consider retiring?
I am retired. I am retired of everything I don't like. Toxic people, cocktail parties, signing books, book tours, all the stuff that I don't like. And I am doing what I love only. And you know what happens with age? You learn to say no. And so now I get invited, and for example, they will pay me a fortune to go to Dubai. And I think, do I want to get in a plane and go to Dubai? No, I don't. Then I don't do it.
Wow.
And I don't consider anything else. Do I want to do it? I don't want to do it. That's now my new mantra.
Cool. That's a great mantra.
Yeah. Do I want to be with this person who is completely stupid or not? No. No, I don't have to be with that person. And I don't have to give an excuse. I just say no.
Well, I think a lot of us at home and here, we now have a new mantra. Just sometimes you could just say no.
And you know, for women, it's so hard.
Yeah.
For women to say no is hard because we are taught from infancy to compromise, to comply, to say yes to whatever comes.
Well, Isabel Allende, this has been a true honor.
Thank you, Adriana.
So much, so many gems of wisdom, and The Wind Knows My Name, a truly phenomenal book, and thank you for writing it, and thank you for sharing your time with us tonight. This has been lovely.
Thank you, and I hope that you can write your book soon.
Yes.
Don't waste
From
your
your
time.
lips to God's ears.
Yes.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone at home for tuning in. Thanks so much for being part of our Random House Studio sessions. Have a good night.